This panel addresses achieving sustainable development through social enterprise. Is this really possible? We're about to find out. Our speakers and panelists are Paul Moreno, founder, Visible Hands. Paul Moreno is Colombia's former Minister of Culture. She founded Visible Hands in 2010, an organization, Paula Moreno, I beg your pardon. She founded Visible Hands in 2010, an organization focused on empowerment of communities in the margins to change power relations in Colombia and the world. Social change. Michael Sumbola, founder Lagos Food Bank. Michael is a SIP alumnus and social innovator whose work precedes him. His initiative aims to reduce food insecurity. And recently, Michael started a family farming program to improve women's contribution to household agriculture and gender equality. Today, Lagos Food Bank has reached over 1.5 million people working with primary healthcare centers in over 126 communities. Fantastic. We also have Suzana Grego, the managing director of Skoll Foundation. Suzana drives the Skoll Foundation's Connect and Celebrate mission and strategy to leverage the foundation's network. She is currently working on a range of urgent global problems, including access to health and education, climate change and clean energy, and better support for civil society and democracy. Welcome, Suzana. Juan van Weijen, Consul General of the Kingdom of the Netherlands to Nigeria. The Netherlands Embassy supports several social entrepreneurs and initiatives. Welcome, Juan. Rachel D. Latimore, Global Portfolio Manager at Echoing Green, where she works with emerging social entrepreneurs cultivating a learning culture focused on leadership and innovation, and she is deeply dedicated to building a diverse and equitable ecosystem to support their work. Welcome, Rachel D. Pearl Uzokwe is the Director, Governance and Sustainability at Sahara Group Limited. In her last role at the UK DFID, Pearl was involved in the development and administration of notable funds, including the Private Infrastructure Development Group, a fund set up to facilitate private investment in the infrastructure needed to alleviate poverty in developing countries. Pearl is also leading the session as moderator.
We've all heard about the Sustainable Development Goals. So following the adoption of the Sustainable Development Goals and the present 10-year countdown from the target dates of 2030, there is an increasing intensity towards this search, this drive to get the sustainable solutions to various development problems, a myriad of them. Now, wrapped up in this as well is this growing need to reshape capitalism, to drive real change, to ensure that this change is also sustained, that this sustained change also comes with measurable impact. The stakes are very high. Now, what do we want to do about it? There's a real desire for change. We see a shift from the traditional decision making, which was based on risk and purely return generally, to one where impact is increasingly becoming a critical third dimension. It is starting to emerge. Now, a survey conducted in 2015 of more than about 1,000 social enterprises in 9 countries showed that we had registered revenues of more than 6 billion euros in provision of services and products to 871 million beneficiaries. There was job creation, particularly for people with disabilities or migrant backgrounds, upwards of about 500,000 people, and job placement for approximately 5.5 million people. These are statistics from social enterprises. As a result of figures like this, of data like this, we're starting to see increasing conversations about social entrepreneurship being one of the key drivers, a possible vehicle and mediums to accelerate this attainment of the SDGs that we so want to see come to life, this attainment. Now, really, what are these social enterprises? Essentially just businesses and enterprises that will have as a their specific social objectives being these are social enterprises or social businesses are really just businesses that have specific social objectives as their primary purpose. Now, These social enterprises are also seeking to maximize profits whilst maximizing benefits at the same time to society, to the environment at large. The question then begs, in spite of these laudable achievements of social entrepreneurs over the years, the Herculean constraints that we see them face, we know that these cannot be overemphasized, both in developed and developing economies. We've now come to a particular point. These challenges that we see with these social entrepreneurs have necessitated a fulcrum to pivot innovation and sustainability across borders. As a result, we basically believe that there's really no better time to press towards interdisciplinary approaches to ensure that we're getting intersectoral collaborations, which really for me is singing out of the hymnal of SDG 17 and partnering for the goals. Thankfully, today we have before us a fantastic cross-section of key industry players from diverse sectors. We've got public sector, private sector, that are helping to foster and work towards a synergistic approach to attainment of these SDGs. I know that the panelists have been introduced, so I will not introduce them again, and I'll go straight into the questions now. So without further ado, I'm very excited to hear your words. And please remember, this will be quite informal because we want to ensure that we have discourse, we have back and forth. We're going to start with Michael. Michael Sumbola is here with us today. And Michael is an active social entrepreneur and founder of the very timely Lagos Food Bank, which is committed to providing nutrition-focused initiatives to combat food security and malnutrition. Michael is also an award recipient on account of all the fantastic and amazing work that I'm sure that a lot of you, especially in this climate, have seen. So he must be doing some things right. So Michael, would you mind outlining some of those impediments to the growth of social entrepreneurship, particularly in this climate? And perhaps in doing that as well, if you would also, if you had the ability to make one wish, if you could outline one change that you would like to see implemented to support social entrepreneurs like yourself. So in 3 minutes, if you don't mind just telling us what some of those impediments, but I think it's important that we set the ground really on what some of these impediments to the growth of social entrepreneurship are, and one change you would like to see to support entrepreneurs like yourself.
Thank you very much, Phil. I'm really excited to be part of this conversation. And just like you said, the social enterprise offers a self-sustaining model or financially self-sustaining model for social impact. And one of the things that actually runs through my mind most of the time, especially as it relates to social enterprise, is that to what extent do we know the value of what social entrepreneurs or social enterprise bring to the table. And I'm talking in respect of what we have here, like what the situation is here. And also to what extent do social entrepreneurs know that they're actually in the business of social enterprise? I know for a fact that social entrepreneurship as it is doesn't really have that much visibility and legitimacy. And, to that extent, we probably might be having a bit of a challenge, because I actually had to speak with a few people before now as to who the people I know that are into social enterprise, but do not even know that they are into social enterprise. They just believe that they're actually doing businesses or they are actually doing stuff that will help the society. So to that extent, I just feel that, okay, in terms of visibility and legitimacy, we still struggle to an extent in that regard. And coupled with the fact that corporate entities, public sector, even development sector can actually remodel their internal framework in such a way that, the social entrepreneurs can be added to their value chain as either suppliers or provider of services, really. And these are one of the ways I believe can actually help social entrepreneurs, because, like I said, we still have issues with legitimacy and visibility. And I will be talking about that in context of, say, Nigeria and developing countries. But one of the ways I feel that the relevant institution can create this enabling ecosystem for social entrepreneurs to thrive is to have them into their value chain as either suppliers and provider of services. And one of the ways, again, is for government, right, to actually support in a way that either with our legal framework. So one of the things that I believe might actually be limiting social entrepreneur or social enterprise, especially in the developing world, is what the legal framework looks like. And I'll be talking from my own background. Now, if you are registered as a business in Nigeria, right? If you are registered, if you want to do a business in Nigeria or you want to register, and then you could be registered as either a for profit or for non-profit. But there's actually an hybrid model which much attention has not been given to because of the bottleneck, which is a company limited by guarantee. And this company limited by guarantee shares similar characteristics with what social enterprise is about. Like, they are actually allowed to do business, right, and are also allowed to make profits, but the profit cannot be shared to the guarantors or the members, and is meant to be refunded back to the business, right? But now, people are not looking at this type of legal framework or structure because of the bottleneck of registration. Now, the requirement for registration is that the consent of the AG, Attorney General of the Federation, needs to be gotten before such business is registered, and that really makes it unattractive for people to get their business registered in such a way, and then they have given enough visibility to social entrepreneurs or social enterprises. So, and to that extent, a lot of people who are actually doing social good and also want to make profits are registered as a business and are subject to tax. Whereas if they are registered as a company limited by guarantee, they won't even be subject to tax, and they are able to do similar thing that would have been achieved if they are registered as a company limited by guarantee. So that's a huge challenge. But I know that the recent law passed, the CAMA 2020, has actually reduced the power of the AG to that extent, and that consent of the AG has been reduced with a publication. So that, I think, in terms of policy on the part of the government, they've done quite well in that regard, knowing that social enterprise play a huge role in achieving SDG. And as you can see, there's actually a huge gap that we see in terms of funding SDGs now. And we see a gap of about 2.3 trillion annually for developing countries. It's obvious that attention is shifting. Okay, good.
No, that you have given us.
So it's shifting to social enterprises, and it's obvious. So it just means that is the future of impact, is the future of where we are heading in terms of achieving SDGs and achieving it very fast within the time limit we have, essentially. No, so that's it, and I hope I've been able to make sure that those
you have hit. Absolutely. Thank you so much for that, Michael. You have absolutely packed a punch. And this is what we're looking for today, the practicality. You've gone in there. You've given us the legitimacy. You've told us about the enabling environment. Without a doubt, it is absolutely critical. You've hit the nail on the head by saying that, yes, of course, you've given the insight. The laws have changed this year, but there is room for additional improvement. There's no doubt about it, whether it's the time lag in getting some of these organizations registered or the additional flexibility in the form that it takes. These are absolutely critical to getting the work done. You are on the ground and you're absolutely giving us examples of ways that this can be propelled further. So having taken it from the social entrepreneur side, I'm going to move along to Suzana. Suzana, thank you so much for being here. And it's always wonderful to get people from different sides of the spectrum. So from your end, Suzana is MD of Show Foundation, which basically drives large-scale change by investing in connecting and celebrating social entrepreneurs such as Michael has just spoken. Now, in doing so, Suzana, you must have come across some of the pitfalls that social entrepreneurs then fall into, because it's one thing to start the social entrepreneurship, but there are different pitfalls that they can fall into. And what is particularly interesting as well in the work that you've done, Suzana, is to see your commitment to mobilizing cross-sectoral support for social entrepreneurs like Michael. Now, if you had a magic wand and you could do something to take away some of these age-long hindrances, like Michael has mentioned, to the growth of social entrepreneurship, what would you like to see changed in some of these relevant institutions? And I'm going to give you flexibility, whether that's private, public, or the development sectors, based on your experience. What changes would you like to see come along to take away some of these hindrances?
Thank you for that, Pearl, and Michael. Michael, I'm so glad that Michael went first, because he is the expert. And we at the Skoll Foundation are not experts in social enterprise, but we have been trying to provide the support that social entrepreneurs and social enterprises need and tell us they need. So it's very heartening to hear some of Michael's points about some of the challenges being people really understanding the value that social enterprise brings at a high scale and a deep level in some ways. And I think there's still that gap in perception that persists, that continues to be a challenge. And then secondarily, the visibility of social entrepreneurs, in addition to the legal frameworks, some of which are better in some contexts than others. So I'll be speaking more about, obviously, the perspective of a funder working within philanthropy, supporting social entrepreneurs and social enterprises. What I would say in a phrase, one of the biggest challenges, and I know this is going to sound so obvious, but is the access to funding, but also to networks and partners. Networks and partners also because no one, even superpower, super figure, can actually create this deep, lasting change. And that includes social entrepreneurs and social enterprises. And yet often we, sometimes as funders and even partners, expect the social entrepreneur and the social enterprise to function across the whole supply chain, as Michael was saying. And yet that's not realistic. That is absolutely not realistic. And you can't create that deep, lasting impact yourself or even your own social enterprise. And so that's why the importance of networks and partners. Now, we've been trying to, at Skoll Foundation, to meet social enterprises and social entrepreneurs where they are. We are by far not perfect, and we are looking to up our game as the landscape changes. I'll try to be very brief, Pearl, and please raise your hand when I start.
I will tell you when we have about a minute left. Okay.
Yeah. So one of the things that we have been doing, and I've been working on especially, is this demonstration effect and trying to help social entrepreneurs and social enterprises tell their impact stories. So raising the visibility and the awareness of how integral their solutions are to innovation and to scaling them and creating real change. So we do the Skoll Awards for social entrepreneurship for that reason, much as you do these awards, which are very important for telling the stories, raising the visibility. We also work with Participant Media, which is our sister organization down in Hollywood, the cooler organization than we are. But they are also trying to tell stories about these issues at a base level and how important social entrepreneurs are to changing them. It's also about knowing what to measure and how to tell the impact story. And this is where I think especially foundations and philanthropy can be critical in helping other funders and investors understand that it's not just about the numbers and that the qualitative results are equally as important as the quantitative. And I've spoken about closing the perception gap because we still see there are many who are, despite the fact that social entrepreneurship, I think, was coined by Bill Drayton and others, maybe 20 plus years ago, there's still a lot who are skeptical about the power of social enterprise to create that deep change. And from the funder side, in addition to investors providing this flexible capital, we too in philanthropy should be providing multi-year general operating support to those social enterprises who are the experts who know what they need and when they need it and how much they need. And so we are working also with another sister organization, Capricorn Investment Group, that does the private equity investments, and we do more of the granting and PRI side of things. But we share the same mission-aligned flexible capital approach. And then last but not least, thank you, Pearl. Last but not least, this is such an important point, and so thank you for letting me know. I want to get that in there. Is that the social enterprises really need connections to funders and investors. And one of the ways in which we've tried to do that is the Skoll World Forum, where we try to bring together all sectors and connect social enterprises with partners both in government and in the private sector. Government, I think, as you all know, I don't need to tell you this, is very important in terms of the delivery and the spread of the solution, so to speak, whereas private sector can be really important to the scale. And so we do try to bring all of those elements. And I will say, in this virtual world, although we've been very challenged to continue this convening and connecting, one thing we are seeing is that it allows us to be even more inclusive of those who cannot make it to Oxford for the School World Forum, and then to more deliberately connect them with the funding and the support that they need. And it's that leveraging networks and intentional connectivity that's so important. But that's very hard. It's very hard to achieve sometimes, and we have a lot more to do on that front.
No, thank you so much for the honesty and for that, that wonderful summary, Suzana. I think that gives us a wonderful segue to then move to speak to Jan van Weijen as the Consulate General for the Netherlands, because that's bringing in the government side to things. You raised so many great points, Suzana. Again, just highlighting some of Michael's earlier points on visibility and talking about basically taking the funding to new levels, because we all know that it's not just about funding and leaving the funding or the seed funds that are given out the startup, but you've got to ensure that you're monitoring this, you've got to ensure that the impact is done right. So it'll be quite nice to then hear from Jan now on how the government comes into this. So Jan, as Consulate General for the Netherlands and based here in Nigeria, you've also had previous postings to other developed and developing nations, which is fantastically important in the conversations that we're having today. You've been in Shanghai, you've been in Baghdad, you've been in Switzerland. You've had frequent interactions with a cross-section from the public to the private sector. I think it would be quite nice to hear from your vantage position. What are your views on the components for an enabling ecosystem? So we've heard this from the first two speakers now, but from your position, it'd be quite nice to hear what one or two components would effectively support social enterprises. And some of these could come from failings, because we've talked about this. Sometimes it's not from seeing what has not worked. Will you then work out what will work? It'd be quite nice to hear from you.
Well, thank you very much. And also thank you, everybody who listens. I mean, social entrepreneurship is very important as it fills up a gap between regular companies and the government. So I think governments should be very pleased to have social entrepreneurs helping the people and helping also the government to deliver their policy agenda. I've worked in a number of places. I will take one of them, Shanghai. As we're now dealing with energy and energetic entrepreneurial people. So there, what I find is very important is that the government should be on board, the local government. They should help creating spaces where these social entrepreneurs can grow. The Netherlands, we worked very much together with the Shanghai city government in helping to establish a more creative city. So we helped them with setting up an creative enterprise week. The creative sector has a lot of social entrepreneurs because part of it also links with the problems people have and the solutions that governments just don't have the inkling to give. So the Shanghai government gave the space to do that, and we helped them fill it. Also, what I would like to know what we do here, we have the Orange Corners, which is executed by the Fate Foundation, where 20 entrepreneurs helped by the big Dutch companies that are here, like Nigerian breweries and Friesland Campina, to really become good entrepreneurs. And then we also have the Impact SME development program here in Nigeria, which is done by Oxfam, where we just help these companies that are already established to upscale. So what I think is very important, and if I have more time later, from the Netherlands, we have a number of lessons learned for the sector itself. So start rather than wait for somebody. Cooperate and build an integrated ecosystem. Ensure fertile soil, networks, companies. Reduce obstacles for social enterprises. Invest in knowledge development. use technology to tackle social problems, and dare to do things differently and propagate
Fantastic.
it. You will fall on your face every now and then, but that's where we come in, because we sometimes can cushion that together with the local government.
Absolutely. No, I love what you've just said, Van, because it's so important. How many you said it's a collaboration. It's basically the meshing together, because one person in isolation, I find that presumption can be such a killer, and sometimes results in projects being dead on arrival. So you're saying you get, and I think what I also like about what you said is, looking at, for example, the creative industry that was focused on in Shanghai, to say, look, we know that we have very admirable goals with the SDGs. There's 17 of them. Perhaps you just focus. You can't do everything. You can't be masters of everything. So hone in on a couple of them, and then sit down and collaboratively with the government, the private sector, and the third industry, just work out which ones to hone in on and focus on, and then really go around creating that enabling environment, especially with some of the developing nations where there are so many different issues and you cannot deal with all of them at the same time. So without further ado, this basically leads me on to the next speaker that I will be calling on. And I think she knows that she will be the person because she's already smiling. And that is Paula. Wow. You again have a fantastic bird's eye view of some of the issues. Paula, you have had experience in multi-sectors, whether as a former Colombian Minister of Culture, an NGO owner, you're a writer, you're a board member of the Ford Foundation. Ford Foundation is heavily invested in supporting social entrepreneurship. In 2017, the foundation, for example, announced that it would invest as much as $1 billion out of its $12 billion endowment to accelerating mission-related investing over the next decade. Now, somebody looking at this from the outside would say, we've had all this investment, and despite the increasing innovation, the creativity we've seen, the versatility of entrepreneurs, well, why would you say that social entrepreneurship is yet to peak, especially in developing regions? And if again, I know that we only have about 3 minutes, but what practical suggestions would you be able to offer to surmount this based on your fantastic experience?
Thank you very much. And to all my colleagues, thank you. I have learned a lot from this panel. And I would like just to say hello to all these young people who are watching us in the morning. I really admire Leap for Africa, Leap Africa, because it is a network of leadership, of young leadership. I run an organization that is Visible Hands. And we also, here in Colombia, we run a network of leaders, Afro-descendant leaders. We are more than 10 million African descent here in Colombia. And we are just having this amazing time here with our partner in Nigeria. And I would like then to make like 3 or 4 points very quickly. First of all, I would really like to emphasize globalization and what does it mean for the African diaspora? Because I think that social entrepreneurs, I was in March in Nigeria, I have been in Mozambique and all over the continent. But so many times I think that many social entrepreneurs and leaders in the continent don't see the diaspora, this big diaspora that we have, and the power of that diaspora. I mean, just in the Americas, we are 250 million people. Outside Africa, we are 250 million people, the African diaspora. In the Americas, we are 150 million people. In Brazil, more than 100. And for instance, here in Colombia, more than 10 million. And I think in this global world, and COVID-19 has really pushed us to think about opportunities to work together, to create wealth in so many ways that Nigeria has been a leader, like Nollywood, and sharing contents and sharing so many things. So I would really would like to call the attention of all these social entrepreneurs and leaders to build power from the African diaspora. When we work together, we are one of the biggest diasporas in the world. We are more than 1,300 million people in the world. And there are so many opportunities from learning, from inspiring each other, for creating wealth, for so many things. So I really would like to emphasize, because I think so many times we don't see each other and we don't recognize the power that is there. Other communities, the UH community and others have really used that to create economic power, but we haven't really done that. And I think it's a moment, and even in this world that we're talking about racial equality and so many things at the global level, we have an opportunity there. So I just wanted to, because of course I come from the African diaspora. I am part of this movement. Second, regarding your questions about, I would like to say that it's so important as social entrepreneurs I consider myself a social entrepreneur. And it's so important to see ourselves in different positions to influence and create the conditions and ecosystem that we need to flourish. You know, to think whether we, yes, in some moment of our lives, yes, we run our own organization, our own organization and all that. But at the same time, we need to think how to get a position of power to influence the conditions for the ecosystem. Wow. And what just my other colleague said in terms of being in government, I was the first Black minister in Colombia. And it's so important to see yourself in different positions that can allow you to create the ecosystems that you need and the conditions. Because sometimes we are just talking between ourselves and not considering how we affect the system, systemic change, and how we mold that change that we want to create in the world. Wow. And I think third, and maybe the last point, because I know I'm taking too time, but I would just also, and regarding your comment about Ford Foundation and our great president, Darren Walker, and the office that we have in Nigeria that is a leader office in our work, I think we have deeply reflect in terms of influencing how to reduce inequality. Nigeria, Colombia, Brazil, we're very unequal society. The wealthiest people doesn't share their wealth and their privilege. And we have such gap that we need to find ways to create more alternative for redistribution. You know, you have some of the African billionaires and how these African billionaires really share their wealth, their power to invest in all these ecosystems in a substantial way. Because sometimes many of the wealthiest people in the world have very small foundations, and we need to be thankful, but there is no reason to be thankful. I mean, they should invest even more. And I think Nigeria has so much wealth that for the Leap African Network, one of the big tasks is how we try to bring more this private money to really invest in creating a more equal society. That would be one of my suggestions. And that's what President Ford Foundation has been doing with all these influential people all over the world.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. That was absolutely powerful, because I think you basically just touched on quite a few things that, if I could just summarize, Paula, you've talked about the power of the diaspora. You've talked about being in positions of power that basically put you in the driving seat, you know, so it's one thing to speak about this, and it's great to speak if you get the ideas, but then you need to then get to the real work. So ensuring that these changes are implemented. Fantastic work that you're doing and have done and continue to do. And it's great to be sharing these ideas with this wonderful ecosystem that we have on this call today. I love what you said about equitable redistribution of wealth as well. So these are all questions that we should be pondering and thinking about as we go about supporting this ecosystem of social entrepreneurs. So that brings me very nicely to the final panelist today, which will be Rachel D. She's got two names. And I hope you can hear me, Rachel. So yes, I think in wrapping this all up now, you have done incredible work with Echoing Green. She's currently the portfolio manager at Echoing Green, and you do a lot of hands-on work with these social entrepreneurs. And I love what you're doing in the sense that you're not just working with them, helping with creating funding, you're creating and cultivating a learning culture that is focused on leadership and innovation. You know, so you're basically trying to create or put in place different components of mindset reorientation to ensure that you're giving them holistic grounding, to ensure that whatever changes are also sustainable and will continue. And that's fantastic to see. So now, as we come to a close with this panel, and we know that we've only got a decade in view, time is of the essence when it comes to achieving these SDGs. You consult with these, and you consult in the public, private, and non-profit sector. If I was to ask you what your suggestions would be for a blueprint for social enterprises to just essentially fast track the developments that we want to see, fast track the attainment of these SDGs, what suggestions would you basically put on the table in ensuring that these social enterprises fast track their attainment of the SDGs with their enterprises?
Yeah, thank you so much for the question, Pearl. And it's been great to sit on this platform with such distinguished colleagues. I have the privilege of being able to kind of serve as a bridge, right? Echoing Green, we are an intermediary. So we provide funding and support and resources for social entrepreneurs. And we get the privilege of being so close to proximate leaders who are actually creating the change on the ground in real time. And so what that means for us is that we get specific intel and insight as to what's really happening in the field. And, Pearl, when you think about a blueprint, right, we're not just talking about social entrepreneurs, right? Like we're talking about an entire ecosystem. Like this has to work in partnership and collaboration together, because no one can do it on their own. And I think Suzana mentioned that earlier, right? Like we all have to work together for this. And so from the social entrepreneur side, what we're seeing is that, these leaders, they have the solutions and they're on the ground, they're in the field, they're working to do that, but they need the resources. They need the partnerships, they need the connections, right? And so what we're calling for really in the ecosystem, in the space, is leaning more towards trust-based philanthropy, right? Where the funders are actually giving the agency and they're trusting these leaders who do know the solutions because they're closest to the problems, right? Paula talked about this in terms of breaking down problematic power dynamics, right? It's super important. There are challenges that our fellows face that are simply out of their control, geopolitical climates, things that they actually cannot influence. And so how do we ensure that we are creating sustainable solutions that redistribute power, right? And put power back into the hands of social entrepreneurs? Also, there is a real need to center and elevate proximate leaders, right? We need to really create platforms that will give them the opportunity to talk about what they're seeing in the field, to talk about the solutions that they're creating in real time, and to actually give them the space to do that. And what that looks like is increased resources. It looks like funding that's unrestricted, right? It looks like getting rid of these arbitrary timelines and reports that we're requiring them to do that takes up so much of their time. We support early stage entrepreneurs. They are simply trying to get the work done. And yes, accountability is important, but sometimes there are these arbitrary timelines and reports that are due that really take away from the work that's happening on the ground. It's like, how do we then create a mutually beneficial relationship by which we trust the organization and trust the leaders, and then also understand how do we truly measure impact? And as Suzana mentioned, it is just equally as important to measure qualitative impact as it is quantitative impact. And in communities of color, in marginalized communities, that looks different, right? Every system is not the same. And so we have to honor culturally responsive ways of understanding how work and impact is being created and both measured. And then what I will close with, because I know we're running out of time, is really just talking about the importance of building an ecosystem that truly listens to and supports frontline leaders in ways that they actually need to be supported, right? We really believe at Echoing Green that while talent is distributed equally, opportunities are not, right? And so we need to really put the power back into frontline leaders, where we say to them, we trust you. We know that you know the work because you're on the ground, as Paula just mentioned. I mean, she's very, very knowledgeable about what's happening. Why? Because she's so close to the ground, and we need to trust that. We need to put the power back into the frontline leaders and really support them, and calling for the entire ecosystem ecosystem to do the same. It's not enough for Echo and Green to believe that, but Skoll has to believe that, right? Like the Consulate has to believe that. There are other partners in this network that have to believe that. And we all have to work together to ensure that we're pushing towards these goals, right? Because it can't happen in silos. It can't just be the responsibility of social entrepreneurs or of funders for that matter, but it has to be the entire ecosystem, the thought leaders, the folks who are pushing and influencing these agendas forward to create space for social entrepreneurs to really create the impact that they're working to do so in the field.
Wow. Thank you so much, Rachel, for that. And this is where we said we're going to wrap up nicely, because you have that great intersection between them and between the work. Look at those words that I've just stuck in there. And you're putting the power back into frontline workers, ensuring that you're increasing the resources, trust-based philanthropy, ensuring that you get rid of the arbitrary timelines. So it's just really listening, listening and taking on board, because sometimes it sounds like it's basic and it's simple, but it's absolutely critical. There will just not be a merger and meeting of the minds where you're not actively listening and taking into consideration what those on the ground are saying. I think the beauty of what we have here is we all do recognize the need to collaborate. I think everybody is beyond that. It's just ensuring that we're creating those ecosystems that will ensure that it's done effectively, that we get in the support, that we get in the frontline workers, put them in positions of power, that we get the governmental support, that we get the support from the enabling environment for the entrepreneurs with boots on the ground. I think it's been absolutely enlightening to just hear this again from all of you on the panel. And I must thank each and every one of you for coming in and contributing wholeheartedly. I know that you've definitely given the participants food for thought. But you see, I firmly believe that it's not just about speaking, it's just that you're basically helping, not just sometimes it's reinforcement, sometimes it's just additional motivation. We have a cross-section of participants here, and we truly hope that those listening will take this on board and help bring about these changes that we want to see. And Michael mentioned something about changes to the law already earlier this year. We've seen changes to our companies law here in Nigeria. It's brought about changes that we're very happy to see. But again, as an example, we need additional changes in policy, in equality, in environment. And with people like you on ground, working and making these suggestions, we know that we can start to make real progress towards this deadline for 2030. So I must thank Leap Africa for organizing this and for giving me the opportunity to moderate this panel. It's been absolutely fascinating.